Welcome, everyone. My name is Honest Friedman. I'm an IT professional and a science fiction writer. Welcome to Science Sci-Fi, connecting the public to science and technology through storytelling. Today, we will examine Mars versus Venus, and specifically about the psychological differences between men and women. As we know, men are for Mars and women are for Venus. Wait a second. I think I made a mistake. Wrong presentation. Let's start from the beginning. We are talking about planetary science, space exploration, and how to becoming a spacefaring civilization. Now, for the real agenda, we're going to talk about Mars versus Venus. I already gave a couple of presentations about comparing Mars to other planetary and celestial bodies. I did a video about Mars versus the Moon and Mars versus Titan. Those links to those videos will be added at this presentation at the bottom in the comments section. And on top of that, at the end of the video, I'll put two cards with link to the video about the discuss comparing Mars to Titan and the Moon. So today we're going to talk about the Mars advantage. Then we'll speak about what the hell is wrong with Venus and the Venus advantage. Apparently, there are many advantages to Venus. And where should we go first? Which planet should we colonize first, Mars or Venus? So stay tuned. Let's focus first about the two pictures of the planet in the middle. At the top, the red planet is, of course, Mars, and at the bottom, it's Venus. We can't see the surface of Venus from Earth using visible light. Those are clouds. The white planets that you see are clouds in the upper atmosphere, which is one of the reason why Venus is so bright, especially also because it's very close to the sun. And one Edgar Rice Burroughs, the science fiction writer about 100 years ago, and other science fiction writers in the early 20th century thought Venus was a tropical planet. And they have a lot of interesting story that today would be looked as fantasy, but they took place on a tropical planet and they assume Venus was one. Granted, back 100 years ago, astronomers were able to see the surface of Mars. Mars has a very thin atmosphere and it's transparent, and they could see the huge canyons. They thought those were tunnels, which led to a lot of science fiction writers thinking that Mars is a dying planet, desert planet. Of course, it is a desert planet, but they thought there are still people there and they don't have a lot of water and they're trying to survive, which led to a different type of stories, including Edgar Rice Burroughs' Mars trilogy and Mars series. There were more books in this, like John Carter of Mars. There was a movie not too long ago and other stories. But now we know better, so let's get back to the science part. The Mars advantage. We already discussed this in previous videos, so I'll go briefly. Mars day is 24 hours and 37 minutes. That's very good for us and also for plant and animals that we're going to bring with us. This is very similar to Earth. Mars gravity is about 38% than Earth's gravity. And this means it's still a very comfortable place to live. We don't know yet about the long-term health benefit or health disadvantage of Mars, but there is one big advantage, and that means that the low gravity means it's a lot easier to launch payload from Mars surface back to space. If you look at the rocket equation, if you go to on Earth, you can do maybe 1 or 2% of the mass of the rocket is payload that actually reach orbit or around the Earth. But in Mars, we can lift much more payload with the same rocket size, perhaps 15% of the mass of the rocket is payload, just because of the low gravity. So low gravity is a big advantage as long as there is no health or risk associated with the health of living in a low gravity. The atmosphere of Mars is very thin, it's about 1% of Earth, and it consists primarily of CO2. Pressure is low. It's very interested in relation to science. It is believed that in the past, Mars has a condition more similar to Earth with a thicker atmosphere and liquid water. It has a mild temperature. The average temperature on Mars is minus 63.3 Celsius, which is about, but it could sometimes get up to plus 20 degrees Celsius, which is about 68 Fahrenheit. And the big advantage of Mars, it has a diverse array of minerals. It has ice water, perhaps underground, and maybe even liquid water. It has CO2 in the atmosphere. We can use the water and the CO2 to create the rocket fuels. And we can use the surface mineral for construction. And also psychologically, Mars is a planet that we can live on the surface. And we were evolved as apes, as mammals on the surface of a planet. So psychologically, it will very easy for us to adapt to living on the surface of a planet. Of course, we need to be able to breathe the air, but inside dome or perhaps in the future after terraforming, Mars seems like a very reasonable place to start building a colony. Other than being a planet that is pretty comfortable or reasonably comfortable for human colonization, Mars is the most explored planet in the solar system other than the Earth itself. There were 63 missions to date. I'm going to show a quick list on Wikipedia. Just bear with me for a second when I share it on the screen. So I'm not going to go in detail into each of this meeting. You can go to the link. It's in the slides. And you can stop the video and look for it. Already from 1960, a lot of Soviet missions, American missions, a lot of landings. And another interesting thing about Mars is since 2004, we have a constant presence on the surface of Mars. There is always at least one or more rovers actively driving around and exploring Mars. So this is continuously been explored for more than 16 years now. So that's a pretty interesting planet. Venus, on the other hand, appears to be like a hellhole. Why is it even an option? Why am I even doing this presentation? Is it really a viable planet? Venus Day, opposed to Mars, which is 24 and something hours, a Venus Day takes 116 days and 18 hours. Those are very, very long days. And if you want not to sleep for 50 something days or sleep for a very long time, you cannot do that. So we are not biologically adjust to a biorhythm of a day that is that long. But that's just the beginning of the story. The surface of this hellish place is 698 Kelvin. That's about 425 Celsius or 979 Fahrenheit. Pretty darn hot, don't you think? The atmospheric pressure is condensed. It's very, very high, about 1350 psi. On Earth, for example, is 14.7 psi. That means that it's the pressure there, it's going to squeeze you and squash you. It's about 100 times more powerful than what happened on Earth at sea level. That's like diving to a depth of I believe 1,000 kilometers. I think it's every 10 meters, one atmospheric pressure. So it's like diving to a depth of 1,000 kilometers. If you have a submarine there, there's pressure. It's very, 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 very high pressure. You need very, very tough submarine. On top of that, the atmosphere, which is made primarily of CO2, it also have a sulfuric material, including sulfuric acid. It rains acidic sulfur. It's not a very nice place to visit. No lander was ever able to survive on the surface of Venus more than 2.5 hours or so. Of course, the Soviets were able to land in the 1980s. This is a pretty explored planet. It has 43 missions to date. Most of them are flyby or in orbit. But the Soviets, as I said earlier, did try to attempt to land a few times. No lander will also survive more than a few hours. What you see here, I'll show a quick Wikipedia link to all the missions that went to Venus. The clearest picture is the one you see here from the surface of Venus. It took place by the Venera 13. It's a Soviet vessel on March 1st, 1982. It crashed and died and cooked about 2 hours after taking this picture. Here are the list of missions to Venus from Wikipedia. Again, I'm not going to dive into each and every one of them. We can see that at least initially, most of them were Soviets, and the Soviets were the only one who attempted to actually land. Here's the Venera 13 that we spoke about earlier. No wonder that a couple of months ago, the Russians said that Venus is a Soviet or Russian planet. So you can check the list here. The question we are asking, if things are so bad, if it's just an horrendous, hellish place, why are we having a discussion? Why are we even considering to have planets as Venus as a possible place for colonization? The reason is the upper atmosphere. As we go up in the air and raise to the air pressure is dropping and also the temperature is dropping. If you go to the edge of space at the height of about 50 kilometers above the surface of Venus, then the conditions suddenly become pretty good, I would say. So first of all, what happened at 50 kilometers above the surface? The atmospheric pressure is similar to Earth. It's like the air we have here. Of course, it doesn't have oxygen. It's primarily CO2. But in terms of pressurizing, it's not very difficult to pressurize because the internal pressure is just similar to the external pressure. You just have to make sure that no gas will leak in and no oxygen will leak out. Also gravity, pretty convenient. Venus gravity is very similar to Earth. It's about 91% when compared to Mars that is only 38%. So biologically speaking, if we live on Venus, gravity is just fine, almost undistinguishable from Earth's gravity. Temperature, as I said, as you go higher, temperature drop down. At this height, temperature is very similar to the temperature on Earth. Again, very convenient. We have more sunlight. In terms of if you want to put a solar array and get solar energy, in Venus, because it's closer to the sun, it has more solar energy. That means we can make more electricity with smaller solar panels. So that's good for energy consideration. So the idea is to build floating cities above the atmosphere, not above the atmosphere, at a height of 50 kilometers, that floating around, maybe some sort of airships. Another thing we can do, we can follow the sun. Since Venus day is 216 days, that means we can travel and do one rotation around Venus in about 160 days. That's much, much slower than a passenger airliner here on Earth. It is possible to do it with an airship. So we can have a cluster of airships or floating devices, platforms, city, whatever you want to call it, that travel slowly around the planet, stay always in the sun, all have lots of energy, conditions are pretty convenient. Other than that, there are a lot of discussions about terraforming Venus on the surface itself. Of course, this is something that may take many hundreds of years, perhaps even thousands of years. There was one interesting proposal by Carl Sagan in 1961 to put blue algae or some sort of algae in the atmosphere that will eventually create oxygen and cool down the planet. The picture we see here to the right is from a proposal from 2018 to actually colonize Venus. And on the left, we see Cloud City from Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. One more thing I would like to add about Venus. Recent study from September 2018 last year indicated that Venus may have a surface water, and it was pretty habitable planet. Oh, it was in the Goldilocks uh, area of distance from the sun, and it had potentially conditions suitable for life for around 3 billion years, and that ended about 7 to 750 million years ago. That means perhaps Edgar Rice Burroughs wasn't entirely wrong about imagining Venus to be a tropical planet. Maybe it had water, and maybe it even had life. We don't know exactly. But to add to that, in September 2020, this year, uh, we detected the phosphorine or pH3 in the upper atmosphere of Venus. What's interesting about this molecule is this molecule couldn't survive for a long time on the upper atmosphere because of ultraviolet light from the sun. So this shouldn't be there unless something created there. So that leads to the theory or the hypothesis that maybe there is still life on Venus, but only in the upper atmosphere. If I conclude that Venus had a good condition for the creation of life and the existence of life for about 3 billion years, that ended about 700 million years ago, but perhaps some life survived in the upper atmosphere. So very stay tuned, very good, very interesting research, I'm sure will come forward, and we will learn more about Venus. So what is the verdict? What do you think? My personal opinion is that we need to colonize both Mars and Venus. However, although Venus looks suitable and perhaps even more suitable to Mars to human lifestyle and human biology, I believe we will go to Mars first for a number of reasons. First of all, we don't have easy access to mineral and building materials in situ when we go to Venus. On Mars, we're going to land on the surface, so all these minerals are going to be available on the surface just a few meters from Mars. But in Venus, if we stay in the upper atmosphere, and other than CO2 and perhaps traces of water from the atmosphere, we don't have any materials there. To get the materials, we either have to bring it from another place. I mean, it's very expensive, very deep gravity well, or we have to go to the surface and bring them back up. And we know how awful the surface is. Maybe it's a good story for a science fiction story. But Mars is easier to get access to local minerals and building materials. Second issue is psychological. We are apes that evolve on the surface of a planet. Psychologically, we are better conditioned to like living on the surface of a planet. We did not evolve to live in floating cities in the air. So that's why, at least personally, I think most people would prefer to go to life on Mars, even though Venus has condition in the upper atmosphere more suitable for our biology. And the last thing, NASA and SpaceX are currently focusing on Mars. This is why I think we will go to Mars first. So tell me what you think in the comments below. Which one do you think we should go first, Venus or Mars? Did you like the video? Consider buying my books. Links are in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. This is very important in order for me to continue in doing these videos. Thank you very much and see you next week.